Hello, I'm Dr. Alex Spyropoulos, professor of medicine at the Zucker School of Medicine at Hofstra Northwell and professor at the Institute of Health System Science as part of the Feinstein Institutes for Medical Research in New York. I'm also a proud member of the Medical Advisory Board of the North American Thrombosis Forum. I will be discussing the top-line results of the cluster randomized trial of the Improved DD Venous Thromboembolism, or VTE, clinical decision support tool that highlights how advanced informatics using an electronic health record agnostic CDS support tool can not only change physician behavior, but also improve clinical outcomes, namely thromboembolism. As an introduction, the practice of evidence-based medicine at the point of care has well-established benefits, particularly when implemented in the form of software-based clinical decision support that has been smoothly integrated into clinical workflows within electronic health record or EHR software systems. Previous work by our team that was funded by an AHRQ grant included the conceptualization and development of Evidence Point, an EHR independent CDS software capable of being integrated into clinical workflows within various EHRs at various clinical sites without requiring the solutions to be rebuilt for each deployment. This would make it easier to create and disseminate software-based CDS solutions that help promote the practice of evidence-based medicine at the point of care and incur high adoption. VTE risk assessment of hospitalized medical patients using a validated risk assessment model represents a classic test case of the use of our EHR independent platform. This is a heterogeneous population with varying risk of VTE, and studies reveal consistent overthromboprophylaxis prophylaxis of low VTE risk patients and underthromboprophylaxis prophylaxis of high VTE risk patients. Also, recent data shows that extended thromboprophylaxis can reduce arterial as well as venous thromboembolism. Our evidence-based Evidence Point platform used a novel EHR agnostic cloud-based integration. The platform itself sat on top of an existing EHR and communicated through application programming interfaces with both the EHR front end as well as the EHR data backend, which included things like health informatics exchange. The platform incorporated an existing CDS tool that was able to retrieve the patient data from the EHR data backend and is able to pre-populate any particular tool with the patient data where possible. The user was also able to fill in any remaining information, and the tool ultimately was calculate a personalized risk score depending on the CDS tool for the patient, which in turn was sent back to the EHR to be incorporated into the patient's medical record. For this particular trial, the CDS tool we used was the Improved DD VTE tool, which is a well-validated VTE risk assessment model in hospitalized medically ill patients. The tool incorporates 7 clinical as well as 1 biological risk factor, and each of these risk factors are weighted and scored. The tool is able to predict patients at low, intermediate, or moderate and high VTE risk. Also, our usability lab identified 3 launch points of the tool, 2 at admission during VTE order entry or history and physical, and 1 in a brand new workflow at discharge itself. As we can see here, when the Improved DD tool launched at the pre-specified launch points, the answers to the yes/no risk factors based on a patient's record were pre-populated based on the patient-specific data in the EHR. The user was also able to manually adjust individual risk factors as well. When the user clicked Calculate Probability, the Improved DD score and 3-month VTE risk percentage was displayed, and the user thus, and ultimately click Record Results and Proceed. The tool closed and the Improved DD score was written to the EHR with an appropriate prophylaxis recommendation. As we can see here, low VTE risk is represented by green, intermediate VTE risk by yellow, and high VTE risk by red. This whole exercise took approximately 10 to 15 seconds. We then conducted a large clustered randomized trial at the level of the hospital to test both the effectiveness of the tool and ultimate impact of the tool in terms of clinician behavior and clinical outcomes. We chose 4 academic tertiary hospitals based on historical data of hospital inpatient admissions. We randomized 2 of them to usual medical care and 2 using this tool. All providers underwent education of the risk score as well. We measured outcomes up to 90 days post-discharge. The primary endpoint was the rate of appropriate thromboprophylaxis based on the predefined criteria of the tool itself. So a score of 2 or 3 identified a moderate risk population that benefited from in-hospital parenteral thromboprophylaxis, usually with heparin, and a score of 4 more identified a high VT risk population that benefited both from in-hospital parenteral as well as extended post-discharge thromboprophylaxis, usually with a direct oral anticoagulant or rivaroxaban for up to 30 days. Secondary endpoints included major thromboembolism and major bleeding at 30 days. We conducted the trial from December 21, 2020 to January 21, 2022 during the throes of the COVID-19 pandemic in New York City. Ultimately, we were able to randomize nearly 10,700 unique medical inpatients, including about 23% of patients with COVID-19. The primary outcomes of the trial showed a very high CDS tool adoption rate approaching 78%. And again, when comparing it to historical rates of adoption, the 10 to 30%, this represents, in my view, a remarkable adoption rate. The trial met its primary outcome. We saw a significant increase in appropriate in-hospital thromboprophylaxis, relatively by about 50%, and absolutely by about 8%, from 72.5% to 80.1%, when comparing the control hospital group versus intervention group. We also saw a significant increase in appropriate at discharge extended thromboprophylaxis in high VT risk patients as well, relatively by 93%, absolutely by about 6%, from 7.5% to 13.6%, as we can see here. Now, looking at the baseline rates in the control group, these are quite high when compared to similar rates in non-academic or community-based settings. Thus, we expect much more robust rates of appropriate prophylaxis in these non-academic settings. This change of physician behavior ultimately led to reductions in adverse outcomes, namely thromboembolism. For venous thromboembolism, which included deep vein thrombosis and pulmonary embolism, we saw 20% relative, or about 0.6% absolute risk reduction from 3.3% to 2.7% in the control versus intervention group. For arterial thromboembolism, which included stroke, myocardial infarction, and systemic embolism, we saw a 65% relative, or about an 0.5% absolute risk reduction. And for total thromboembolism encompassing both, we saw a 29% relative, or 1.1% absolute risk reduction. Major bleeding was rare and did not differ between groups. Paradoxically, all-cause mortality was increased in the intervention group. And when reviewing internal data, we suggest that this was due to redeployment and other pandemic-related issues of restructuring in one hospital during the pandemic. So, in conclusion, our study has major health system implication, as is shown for the first time that a novel universal platform agnostic tool for clinical decision support for VT risk assessment, incorporating the improved ED-VT model that is integrated into clinician workflow, demonstrated both effectiveness in increasing adoption of evidence-based practice and significantly increased appropriate thromboprophylaxis, which ultimately led to a significant reduction in heart outcomes, namely venous and arterial thromboembolism in hospitalized medical patients. I thank you for your attention.